Picture this. It's 1974. The nation is gripped by the Watergate scandal, a political storm of epic proportions. At the center of it all is President Richard Nixon, and a set of secret audio tapes recorded in the Oval Office. What was on those tapes? That's the question everyone wanted answered, especially the special prosecutor investigating the Watergate break-in and subsequent cover-up. Welcome back to Famous Legal Cases, where we explore the landmark trials that have defined our world. Today, we're re-diving deep into one of the most dramatic constitutional showdowns in American history: the United States v. Nixon. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a clash that pitted the power of the presidency against the rule of law itself. So, what was the heart of the conflict? The special prosecutor, Archibald Cox and later Leon Jaworski, believed the tapes held undeniable proof that President Nixon and his top aides had obstructed justice. They argued that these recordings were essential evidence needed for the criminal trial of several Nixon administration officials. They subpoenaed the tapes, demanding they be turned over. But Nixon refused. His lawyers fired back with a powerful and, at the time, untested argument: executive privilege. They claimed that the president had an absolute, unqualified right to keep conversations with his advisors confidential. This confidentiality, they argued, was vital for the effective functioning of the executive branch. If a president couldn't speak freely with his team without fear of public disclosure, how could he govern? This set the stage for a monumental legal showdown. The stakes couldn't have been higher. It wasn't just about whether Nixon would be implicated in a crime. It was about a fundamental question of American democracy. Is the president above the law? Does executive privilege create a shield that can block a criminal investigation? The entire country watched, holding its breath, as the case rocketed toward the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. The very balance of power, carefully designed by the founding fathers, the checks and balances between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches was hanging in the balance. If the Supreme Court sided with Nixon, it could set a precedent that a president could operate beyond the reach of the justice system. If they sided with the prosecutor, it would be a direct challenge to the authority of the sitting president. The tension was palpable when the case, officially titled United States v. Nixon, was argued before the Supreme Court in July 1974. The nation was polarized. Supporters of the president saw the investigation as a partisan witch hunt, an attempt to overturn the results of an election. They believed in a strong executive and felt the president needed the protection of privilege to lead effectively. On the other side, critics saw Nixon's refusal as the act of a monarch, not a democratically elected leader. They feared that if he succeeded, the very idea of accountability would be destroyed. The media coverage was relentless. Newspapers and television broadcasts were filled with legal analysis, political speculation, and man-on-the-street interviews, capturing the public's anxiety. It felt like the country was on the brink of a constitutional crisis. Inside the hallowed halls of the Supreme Court, the 9 justices faced a decision that would echo through history. Interestingly, one justice, William Rehnquist, had previously worked in Nixon's Justice Department, so he recused himself to avoid any conflict of interest. That left 8 justices to decide the fate of the presidency. The legal arguments were complex, but the core issue was simple. The court had to weigh the president's need for confidential advice against the fundamental principle that justice requires all relevant evidence to be heard in a criminal proceeding. It was a classic legal balancing act, but with the entire government structure at stake. Could the court force a president to comply with a subpoena? The world waited for the answer. On July 24, 1974, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. In a stunning and decisive move, the court ruled unanimously 8-0 against President Nixon. The opinion, written by Chief Justice Warren Burger and Nixon appointee himself, was a landmark statement on the limits of presidential power. The court acknowledged that there is a legitimate need for executive privilege to protect sensitive military or diplomatic secrets. However, they declared that this privilege is not absolute. When it comes to a criminal investigation, the need for evidence and the integrity of the judicial process outweighs a general claim of confidentiality. The ruling was crystal clear. No person, not even the President of the United States, is above the law. The court ordered Nixon to turn over the tapes. The impact was immediate and catastrophic for Nixon. He had gambled on the Supreme Court upholding his claim of absolute power, and he had lost. Reluctantly, He complied with the order and released the subpoenaed recordings. Among them was the infamous smoking gun tape, recorded just days after the Watergate break-in. It captured Nixon discussing a plan with his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, to use the CIA to stop the FBI's investigation. It was undeniable proof of his involvement in the cover-up from the very beginning. For months, Nixon had denied any knowledge or participation. Now, his own voice condemned him. The smoking gun tape destroyed what little political support he had left. Even his staunchest defenders in Congress could no longer back him. With the evidence now public, the political endgame began. The House Judiciary Committee had already been drafting articles of impeachment. With the release of the tapes, impeachment in the full House of Representatives and conviction in the Senate became a certainty. Republican leaders from Congress visited the White House and delivered the grim news to the president. His presidency was over. Facing this reality, Richard Nixon made a historic decision. On the evening of August 8, 1974, he addressed the nation from the Oval Office. He announced that he would resign the presidency, effective at noon the next day. On August 9, 1974, Richard Nixon became the first, and to this day, the only U.S. president to ever resign from office. Vice President Gerald Ford was sworn in, famously declaring, "Our long national nightmare is over." So, what is the lasting lesson of United States v. Nixon? It's far more than just the story of one president's downfall. This case stands as a powerful testament to the resilience of the American constitutional system. It affirmed the principle that the rule of law applies to everyone, regardless of their position or power. The judiciary, as an independent and co-equal branch of government, demonstrated its authority to check the power of the executive. It established a critical legal precedent that while a president may have those privileges are not a license to obstruct justice or place oneself beyond the reach of the law. The decision reinforced the idea that accountability is not just a political concept, but a legal one. In the decades since the ruling in United States v. Nixon has been cited in numerous cases involving government officials and questions of privilege. It remains a cornerstone of constitutional law, a constant reminder that the American system of government is designed to prevent the concentration of unchecked power in any single individual or branch. It's a story about how the system, when tested to its absolute limit, held firm. It's a victory for the principle of a government of laws, not of men. This case ensures that the scales of justice, though they may sometimes seem unbalanced, are ultimately weighted by the Constitution. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into one of history's most pivotal legal battles. The story of United States v. Nixon is a compelling reminder that the law can, and must, hold even the most powerful to account. If you found this case as fascinating as we do and want to uncover more of the trials that shaped our democracy and our understanding of justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Every week, Famous Legal Cases brings you the stories behind the verdicts that changed the world. We'll see you in the next one.